Prison is meant to be a punishment, but in some places, it's something far worse. Brutality, forced labor, starvation, and conditions so horrific that survival isn't guaranteed. Today, we're counting down the 5 worst prisons in the world, where inmates face unimaginable suffering. You're watching Brain Nibble, where we dive into the darkest, strangest, and most fascinating topics. If you like this kind of content, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Now, let's begin. We start in Asia, zooming into North Korea, one of the most secretive countries in the world, deeper into South Pyongan province, and finally, to Kaesyeon, home of Camp 14. There's a real lack of information around on Camp 14, mainly because Camp 14 is a total control zone, meaning prisoners are never released. Many are imprisoned because of North Korea's 3 generations of punishment rule, where entire families are jailed for the supposed crimes of one person. But, in 2005, Shin Dong-yuk became the only known person born in Camp 14 to escape. He watched his own mother and brother executed for trying to flee. He finally made it out by climbing over an electric fence, using his friend's body as a shield. Shin Dong-hyuk gave a chilling description of life inside Camp 14 in his book Telling of Existence, where prisoners are forced into 14+ hours of hard labor daily in mines, fields, and factories. Food is so scarce that many survive by eating insects, rats, or whatever they can find. Torture and public executions are common for even the smallest rule violations. Although international humanitarian groups, such as Amnesty International, have released satellite imagery showing its location and development over the years, North Korea still denies its existence, leaving the estimated hundreds of thousands of prisoners, many of which are completely innocent, living in horrific concentration camps. But Camp 14 isn't the only prison where survival is unlikely. Next, we head to a place closer to home, Eastern Europe, zooming into Russia deeper into Moscow, where we find Butyrka Prison, one of the most overcrowded and oppressive detention centers in the world. Originally built in 1771, Butyrka Prison has held political prisoners, revolutionaries, and criminals for over 250 years. It's known for overcrowding, tuberculosis outbreaks, and torture. Cells designed for 10 inmates often hold 100, with barely enough room to lie down. Stalin's secret police used Butyrka to break enemies of the state before executing them. Famous inmates have included Fyodor Dostoevsky, Leon Trotsky, and Soviet dissidents. The air is thick with disease. Tuberculosis and HIV are rampant due to lack of medical care. And despite promises of reform, it's still one of Russia's most feared prisons, with inmates packed like sardines in crumbling cells. It's time to leave Russia, over Europe and the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean, into Cuba, and finally to the home of the most controversial and secretive detention centers in modern history, Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp, or simply Gitmo. Opened in 2002, after the 9/11 attacks, Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp was designed to hold suspected terrorists outside of U.S. legal jurisdiction. It became infamous for indefinite detention without trial, harsh interrogations, and allegations of torture. At its peak, it held over 700 prisoners, many without formal charges. Waterboarding, sleep deprivation, stress positions, and extreme isolation were commonly used to extract confessions. Prisoners spent years in legal limbo, with no trials, no set sentences, and no clear path to release. Many detainees were held on flimsy or unverified intelligence, some later proven innocent after years of imprisonment. The CIA's secret Black Sites program was linked to Gitmo's interrogation methods, sparking global outrage. The UN and human rights groups have repeatedly called for its closure. But despite this, from Barack Obama,
"We're cleaning up something that is quite simply a mess." The decision that I made was to order the closing of the prison camp within 1 year.
As of 2024, only about 30 prisoners remain, down from its peak of over 700, but still the camp remains operational, with no clear end in sight. Leaving Guantanamo but staying in the Americas, we're zooming into El Salvador, one of the most dangerous countries in the world, where we find Ciudad Barrios Prison, a facility so overrun that the prisoners, not the guards, control it. Originally built for 800 inmates, Ciudad Barrios Prison now holds over 2,500, most of them gang members from Mara Salvatrucha, commonly known as MS-13. Due to long-time rivalry with the 18th Street Gang, Ciudad Barrios Prison only houses MS-13 members. Rival gang members or outsiders are either killed immediately or forced into servitude. The Salvadoran government doesn't really run the prison. There are no guards inside the prison walls, they just patrol the perimeter. Inmates live under gang law, with strict codes and brutal punishments for breaking the rules. Simply put, if you're not MS-13, you don't survive here. For our final stop, we head back to Russia, zooming into the Orenburg region near the border with Kazakhstan. Here, hidden away in the cold, lies one of the most feared prisons in the world, Black Dolphin Prison. It gets its unofficial name from a prisoner-constructed sculpture depicting a black dolphin, which is set in front of the main entrance. Built in 1745, Black Dolphin is Russia's most secure and most feared prison. It houses the absolute worst of the worst: serial killers, cannibals, terrorists, and mass murderers. Every prisoner is sentenced to life without parole. Despite being open nearly 300 years, no one has escaped, and no one leaves alive. It's -40 degrees, buried deep in a forest larger than Germany, with 24/7 total control. Prisoners are watched every second of the day, never allowed to rest unsupervised. When they're moved, they're blindfolded, ensuring they never learn the layout of their own prison. Inside, they exist, not live, in tiny, concrete cells, barely big enough to stand. Meals last 90 seconds. Sitting or lying down during daylight hours? Forbidden. The regime is so brutal that when news reached the prison that the death penalty had been abolished, many prisoners made their own decision. Within a week, they left the only way they could, inside a coffin. From the brutality of North Korea's Camp 14, to the lawless rule of Ciudad Barrios, and the psychological torment of Black Dolphin Prison, these places push the limits of human endurance. Some of them operate in secret, others in plain sight. But all are a reminder that for some, prison isn't just a sentence, it's a slow death. Which of these prisons do you think is the worst? Or do you know of one even more brutal? Let me know in the comments. If you found this video interesting, hit like and subscribe to Brain Nibble. We'll see you in the next one.